You're listening to Until They Sleep. Please note, this programming may not be appropriate for younger listeners.
Have you ever gone to a family get-together and are having an absolutely great time until someone ruins the vibe by bringing up a topic no one was ready to discuss? Well, listen in as we discuss the misplaced emotions of various people's traumas. Thanks for listening. Welcome back to Until They Sleep. I am Chantel with my husband.
I'm Daniel.
And we're not going to get into too much tidbits about what's been going on. You know, we're busy parents. We have 4 kids. Thank you all for listening once again on the different platforms. We wanted to talk about a conversation we had recently with some family members and just kind of hash it out, I guess, over this medium. Maybe get your thoughts on how we reacted to this situation.
Well, more of the situation led us to think about like issues, you know. I guess we all have traumas that we deal with certain things in life differently.
Yeah.
And maybe we're triggered by certain things that trigger a trauma that we've had. So
and
unconsciously. Yeah. And so it was funny because we had a situation, like you said, happen. And then I had an article that just mysteriously popped up. And
it's always listening.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, it helped me realize that there are some, maybe it could be like one of those childhood traumas or issues that might happen of neglection or not enough love or affection. So it made us have a conversation about it, right? And it's been something that's been kind of back and forth. It comes up every once in a while.
I mean, ultimately, just a brief synopsis then on what transpired to lead to this conversation was, you know, we were having a conversation with some family members, and it was a young adult being judgmental over an adult, you know, old enough to be their parent, but not their parent, and judging them for their life decisions when they already have grown kids. Like, they don't have little kids at home anymore. And so the way this young man came across kind of took all of us aback. Like, whoa, dude, like, you're not thinking about this correctly. But I feel like you're very close to this person. So your reaction was even stronger because you were like, dude, no. And you're very straightforward in the way you say things. And I mean, we haven't really heard from this family member since.
At all, actually.
We're kind of feeling like I think they just took it in the wrong way, but you did come across very strongly. And in retrospect, after conversations, you know, and like you said, that article popped up to kind of help you think about the possible traumas in this person's life. Do you want to give more?
Yeah, so I guess the main idea is, you know, as grown-ups and parents or divorced parents, widowed parents, whatever it might be, sometimes we make decisions in life and some people decide to move on and some people don't. Apparently this adult, let's say person A, has moved on with their lives. Their children are grown up. They're adults, young adults, going to college, working. They have, you know, significant others. So they are remarried and they're, you know,
the parent.
Yeah, the parent has just recently got remarried, starting a new chapter in their life, right? Their children have grown up. The little birds have grown, and it's about time for them to leave the nest.
But that's the thing, right? The little birds never left the nest.
Right. So now the mama bird's leaving the nest. She found a new bird. I like how we're phrasing this, and she's flying to another new nest, right?
Yes.
And let's say in another state. The young man, we'll call him another bird, right, has an issue with this. His idea is that the mom bird should never leave the nest and should always be there. Of course, we all deal with things differently. He was very passionate about it. He was very emotional about it, I think.
Yes.
And
but because of your connection with this person, I believe that you took that emotion as a weakness.
Yes, I saw it like a weakness. I saw that he gave something too much power when he shouldn't have.
Because it had nothing to do with him.
Right. It doesn't affect him in any way, shape, or form. Maybe the fact that he flies with these other little birds every once in a while.
Yes.
And, you know, so he gets to hear them sing their sad songs.
Yes.
So it might make him sad, but at the moment I didn't think about it until the conversation got more escalated or more heated. I realized that, well, this person has a trauma, and it's because they also have abandonment issues. And I pointed it out. And I guess from what I'm understanding from you is that the way my approach, the way I went about it, my tone was very strong, straight to the point.
Hit the nerve.
Matter of fact, yeah, I grabbed that nerve and I used it like a little speed bag as a punching bag, and it was just left it exposed out there for everyone to see. And feelings were hurt, traumas were triggered, and yeah.
Well, in that sense, this young man suffered a lot of emotional trauma growing up, and we are well aware of that as a family unit in general. And the fact that you threw that in his face, and I know you were just trying to make a point, like, dude, like, let it go. Like, the situation is different, right? Because this individual's trauma was at a very young age. And like you said, these other young birds are adults,
Yeah.
So going back to the whole baggage thing and the emotional stuff, because we discussed it, right? We were like, okay, look, this kid has a lot of emotional stuff that it makes sense that he's feeling this abandonment issue even as a young adult. And because it's a trauma I believe he's never actually dealt with. I don't think the family in general has ever dealt with. It's been more of a like, oh, well, it happened, move on.
It's a subject that they probably try to avoid, right?
Yes.
It's just like
overall.
we don't speak about that.
Yeah, we don't talk about it. We don't talk about we have an idea, involved.
Yeah, or what might have happened or something, if something happened, but let's just not go down there because we don't want to, right?
Yeah.
And I think for me, it's more of I understand that we all have things in life, right? Parents got divorced when you were a kid, and maybe you have trauma with that, or one parent abandoned, or a parent passed away, whatever
happened,
touched you, whatever.
Yeah.
We understand that we all have had our own journeys and experiences, and we have had things that have scarred us and have made us not trust people or deal with things certain different ways. I understand that everybody has a skeleton in their closet.
Yeah.
And everybody deals about it different. I understand. I'm trying to understand. I don't understand. I'm trying to understand that not everyone has dealt with their issues the way that I have had. That nobody faces it face on or doesn't let them empower or handicap them,
I think in general, most people don't deal with the true issue. That's why so many young people are messed up these days. It's because family just kind of sloughs around it, doesn't talk about it, doesn't help in the healing process. And the thing is, a lot of people think that if we just don't talk about it, and this is not current. I mean, actually, if you think about old stories, people just didn't talk about the taboo things. Right.
And I think nowadays everybody just kind of tippy toes around stuff, right?
Because you don't want to offend, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's like, oh, I can't offend anybody. I can't say what I'm really thinking. You definitely don't think that. You say what's on your mind. And I know that in our conversation right now for this, we're tippy-toeing around it because we're just trying to protect those family members' identities. And we're not going to go into too much
I think it's just
explanation.
It's a day-to-day life thing. And I thought it was a good conversation point of, traumas. Like, what kind of traumas do you have? How do you go about it? How do you handle it? Has it affected your life? Has it affected the way that you think or try to do things? I mean, it's like we all do things differently, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, some people just box it in and they never bring it back up. Some people want to talk about it because it helps them talk about it. It shows other people that they've been in places and maybe that would help them. And then there's people that like to talk about it because they want to be victims and they want people to say, "Oh, poor baby." Yeah.
But even on that sense, you're gonna have your group of people who maybe talk about it because they just loved You know, like let's say it's a family member that passes away, and you've got a group of family members that never want to talk about that experience. And yet you've got another person within the family group that always wants to talk about it. And then people can be like, oh, you know, stop being a victim. Stop making yourself so important by saying those things about the deceased individual. And in the end, it's not necessarily that you're trying to get attention from it, but it's just that you loved that person so much that you don't ever want anybody to forget about them. Like, isn't there a song? I think you recently told me about a song like that, right? That the dad was like, had lost his son.
Oh, yeah.
And he was always talking about his son, but then in a dream or something, the son came and told him to stop talking about him because it wasn't letting him move on.
Right.
And then he wrote a song for his son saying, I'm going to talk about you till the end of my days.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
I loved you so much. Right? Something like that.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm
I'm
saying.
fine.
It's like,
I forgot about that. That's a good.
like, and that's what I'm saying. It's like, I think sometimes we think that trauma it's better to keep it quiet. You know, it's better to not talk about it and not let other people know what happened to us because we don't want to be judged by that for that experience, even if it was out of our control. You know, especially for young children who, like this particular family member who we know suffered a lot when they were very young. And we'll never understand his trauma, right? Because we haven't experienced that level of trauma. And on top of that, he also has abandonment issues. So you can relate to that in a way, but not at the same level. And I think that's your frustration because you got through it, right? You feel what's the word I'm looking for? Surpassed, or you were able to deal with that trauma and make yourself better.
Yeah.
Whereas you see that this young man is also still stuck at home living with his family, not moving on, right, with his family. And it's the same situation. These other birds are still living at home, even though they have jobs and they have, you know, intimate lives with someone else. They're still at home and they haven't really moved on. And just like this young man who hasn't really moved on for whatever reason, you know, he believes he still has to be at home, or maybe it's just too expensive for him to move on because of the state that we live in. And whatever the reason is, in your mind, he should be out of the house. He shouldn't be mad about any of this because any man his age, any man their age, all the birds' ages, because they're all about the same age, should be gone.
Right.
And on their own and living their life. And who cares what their parents are doing because that's their life. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But going back to the whole trauma thing and this article that you sent me, it's basically the article was about people who never felt truly loved as children usually display these 7 behaviors later in life. I'm just going to run off the titles and then we can discuss your thoughts on.
Okay.
So this is on Global English Editing. The first one says difficulty in forming meaningful relationships. So people who have never been truly loved can't form meaningful relationships because they didn't learn to do this as a child, as a loved child.
So it's hard for them to create those relationships. Okay.
Yeah.
They're on a guard, probably.
Yeah. And then overemphasis on self-reliance. So not, I guess, being trusting of others and not depending on others. Not so much trusting,
not depending on other people. It's like expect like having to do everything themselves because they know that they're by themselves. Okay, I see that.
Okay, sensitivity to criticism because they don't care to be criticized about how or when they do things, I imagine.
Okay. So I'm sorry, so remember, so this was again, these are symptoms of a child. That didn't have enough love or affection.
These are people who they themselves, they never felt loved.
And so those are issues that they have to deal with as adults.
Okay. Yes.
All right.
So sensitivity to criticism. It says heightened sensitivity to criticism. It says it's because the absence of love and affirmation during the formative years can.
Right. So they were probably
negative.
Judged a lot, right, as children because they didn't have love. So in some cases they get put down or, a lot of judgmental growing up. So then that might just trigger that trauma of being a child again.
Possibly, or just even being neglected, period.
Right. Okay.
Just the neglect in general, which will also increase self-reliance, which was number 2. Mm-hmm. Okay, struggling with self-worth is number 4. And this is, self-esteem, believing that you can accomplish things or believing that you can be successful.
Right, or being more like the victim card, right?
Yeah.
As a grown up. Okay.
Yeah. So, and then number 5 was a fear of abandonment. Because of course, if you weren't shown love or if your family wasn't around to give you love, then of course you feel abandoned. And then,
but yeah, you're afraid to end up by yourself because you were already kind of by yourself.
And that's part of the meaningful relationships part, right? Number 1, where it's hard to form a meaningful relationship because you were abandoned, right? You didn't have anybody around you. Difficulty expressing emotions. I guess it depends on other factors. I think a lot of this so far depends also on personality.
Yeah, and I imagine it affects people that haven't faced these issues, right?
Yeah, that would make sense, especially the difficulty expressing emotions.
Right.
Then number 7 is resilience. They do tend to be very resilient, which means they're able to get through things.
Okay.
Which is interesting to say, I think, if you haven't dealt with the emotions. But some people say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? That gives you that resilience.
Yeah, but I guess in a way it kind of contradicts itself, right? On some aspects.
Yeah, I do believe this article is not, I wouldn't even say 50% right. I think, honestly, it really does depend on your personality, because I know you don't like me to use you as an example, but I mean, I know you still have your issues, like anger issues, and that might stem from something, that hasn't been dealt with. But for the most part, based on how you were raised,
right,
which we've discussed before, so we're not going to go into right now.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess that's the other part why I was so harsh, right? So I think everyone has traumas. Everyone has something, right, that has scarred them. And I think it's just the fact that I have my traumas, but I know what they are.
Yeah.
I know what started them. I just dealt with them in a certain way.
And
right?
and I you don't have a difficulty in forming meaningful relationships. You had a lot of love until you were 7, right? You felt love. Like, was there ever a time you didn't feel love until your mother passed?
No, of course.
You felt very loved, right?
My mom loved me.
It was after that, right?
Yeah.
But I'm saying, despite that, you don't have and despite the lack of love from that point forward in your life, you don't have a difficulty in forming meaningful relationships. I mean, you make friends very easily. We've been together forever, so I would say I'd like to think that's a meaningful relationship, and we've known each other forever. and so it's, I don't think that that's an issue for you, and I don't think it's an issue for everybody who didn't have love or a lot of love growing up. I do see how it could happen, where you just don't know how to love if you've never received it. I get that. But you did have some love. And this young man also did have some love.
Oh, yeah, he has. Even now he has plenty of love.
He might not have loved, he might not have received a true sense of what love should be. Because of all the back and forth when he was very little. But definitely he was loved, by you and his, the rest of his family.
And now that you say that, I think it's a common thing. And we say that, the younger generation, that's one of the main issues, right? But when you think about it, most of these kids that are grown-ups now, they came up from a split or broken households.
A lot of them, yes.
Right? And
it's true.
So that's their common thing. They split between, parents, or they only have one parent, the parents were divorced. And I'm pretty sure it might be a big reason why they are like that. Or maybe if they're still with a parent, why they don't want to leave the nest. Maybe that's part of the abandonment issue, right? Like,
I'm sure there's got to be a study out there. Some psychology group somewhere has had to have done a study.
And that's a trauma, right?
Yeah.
It's a big trauma.
Oh,
right
yeah.
there.
My parents are divorced. And I mean, of my siblings, I was already much older when my parents divorced, as was the brother right behind me. But my youngest brothers, they definitely do have some of these things. They do have difficulty forming.
Well, that's right. They do have a trauma.
And it's not meaningful relationships, because they can form very meaningful relationships, just not emotional relationships. Like one of my brothers in particular, he just has a really hard time loving, right? Not because he didn't receive love, but because he saw love broken. And he never wanted to experience that, because in his head, if his parents couldn't make it, then why is he going to even try? That's a different trauma.
Yeah, because as parents, right? Your parents, like, there's two strangers that love each other, and then that love, the proof of the love is usually the children.
Supposed to be,
right? The proof of that is the children, and then when you're that fruit of that love between two people, and you see them come apart, go their separate ways, then you question if you really are that fruit of that love, right?
And in the end, a lot of parents, I'm not say all parents, because I know that this doesn't always happen, but a lot of families always emphasize the fact that when their parents divorce, it's not the kid's fault. It's just that the parents can't get along anymore. They're not on the same page. They've just drifted apart. With time. Okay, for example, that's my parents. So they moved on.
Right.
And it had nothing to do with us. At least that's what they tell us.
And they still have a pretty good relationship.
And they still have a good relationship.
They're still friends. They talk.
And I guess
that's cool,
That's the teller of, a divorce, especially.
My dad's side of the family, we were told, like, if a person, you have a relationship with a person and you decide to go your own ways, like, that's it. Like, you're cutting them off. They're cut off.
Yeah, that's what you've always said. Is like, oh, that person's gone. That person's gone. You don't even talk to their family anymore.
No,
you cut all ties.
Yeah.
And the thing is, in families like that, for love for children, right? A lot of people's like, what's the joke? It's like, oh, more Christmas gifts, right? Yeah. If our parents are divorced, and the reality is, for families maybe that are well off, that might be true, but are you getting the love and affection and attention from that other parent that is giving the extra monetary stuff, right? Like you've told me your dad was never a love giver, but that you never suffered financially. Right. So he wasn't affectionate with you. That was your mother's role when you were very little. And then you never had that affection again, from another mother figure. And then from your dad, you didn't get it either. You just got nice clothes and a
it wasn't. He wasn't the hugging, kissing.
He was a man's man.
He was a man, right?
Yeah.
But his actions definitely showed me he loved me to a certain point.
To a point, right? Yeah. I think you appreciate it now more as an adult and as a father than you did at that moment, probably.
Right.
Okay, and then so love as a child can be measured in many different ways. There's so many factors to that, and kids nowadays can claim as, oh, I wasn't loved enough. Why? Because your parents bought you everything you ever asked for and didn't argue with you, and that was their way of showing you that they loved you, or because they were too hard on you and gave you chores and expected you to do well in school because they wanted you to be successful in life. Like, how did they not love you? And I think that's a lot of kids try to claim this trauma of, I wasn't loved enough as a child because of that, versus the kid who was actually getting beat, versus the kid whose parents were always gone, and didn't check in on them and didn't care if they were alive or if they were fed or any of that. You know what I mean? Like, there's a big difference, I think, in those mindsets. Because I think
everybody grew up very different. Everybody was raised
that's why
different.
the kid that was raised having nothing, like their parents weren't around, they didn't care, that kid's going to possibly be more resilient, right? That they're going to go to the overemphasis number 2 of self-reliance and be like, I can only depend on me. I'm the one who's going to take care of my siblings. I'm the parent in this house. I don't have to listen to my parents because they're never around anyways.
Yeah, and I guess in that aspect, right, you can have 4 kids, let's say for example, and they grow up in the same household, and all 4 of them are going to be different because they're all going to see it different, right?
Yeah, that's how we are in our house.
Right.
Yeah.
No, but I'm just saying, like, one kid can be like, well, mom and dad were hard, or mom and dad, and the other one can be like, well, they didn't care about us because they were never around, and another one could be like, my parents loved me because I had everything I needed. I had a roof, I had food, I had clothes. They made sure I went to school and I got good grades. Like they were they, and the fourth one might be like, I had the most loving, caring parents in the world. They were the best, and then it's kind of like one of those where then all 4 of them don't match. Everybody has a different experience, right? Because the first one, obviously, you're learning how to be a parent with the first one. Second one, it's kind of like you kind of already adjusted. Third one kind of, is more like, no, they were there, they did this, did that, and the fourth one's like, oh, they were always there for me. They were always hugging me. They were always kissing me. It's just everybody has their own point of view, right?
It is personality,
but
right?
they could have been exactly the same
with all of them.
With all of them,
yeah. But it's each child's perception and personality type. Because as a parent, I mean, you don't really know how to parent. You can't. Okay, first of all, we've learned you can't. Or we're learning, you can't parent every child the same, right? Because they're all so different, right? The way we treat the eldest, I know we try to treat all of them the same, but ultimately it doesn't work, right? We're butting with their horns, right? Because they're trying to exert their will over our dominance, right? And, we're clashing because it's just not the same. Like, I don't know how else to explain it. It's just not the same. And it's definitely not the same as how we were raised. Are we traumatizing our kids? Like,
yeah, I mean, I said it before, right? Like, there might be things that my dad did or your parents did that we don't agree with, and so we try not to do it with our kids, right?
Yeah.
But then in the long run, was it the right thing to do, or was it the wrong thing to do? I guess you won't know until later on. And same thing, our children are gonna do. I didn't like that my dad did this, and I don't like that my mom did that, so I'm not gonna do that with my kid.
Yeah, and like taking this back to the young man, so. In his situation, one parent made a decision to not be in his life all the time and give him to the other parent. And it happens a lot, right? This situation happens a lot. Do you think that was a good decision? And because of that, should he be different? Like, should he think differently based on that decision?
Yeah, see, it's just, can you imagine if any little thing in life it's going to trigger a trauma and we're going to react like that? Like, we wouldn't be able to function at all. Like, we wouldn't be able to carry on with anything.
I mean, is it possible that that whole situation that occurred was just in a moment he was in a safe space, or he thought he was in a safe space and could, vent. Yes, and vent and not have gotten reamed.
Yeah.
I think about that too. I'm like, I kind of feel bad that we can't go back and say it differently. But this is another thing that you and I have talked about, and it's come up very often recently in different discussions and arguments we've had, at home, this whole tone thing, right? When someone comes and tells you something, and this kind of links to the whole idea of you can't parent every child the same, is you can't talk to every person the same. And this is something one of my brothers has learned, right, in his business, that you have to learn to talk to your client to get them to do what they need to do, and I think it works the same way with your children, with everybody you talk to. If you can't talk to them to where they're listening to you because you're coming across with the wrong tone or too strongly, and I know you see this as a sign of weakness, but you're just not going to get through that barrier, whatever barrier they have. Like, if you're in a certain state of mind, I cannot talk to you in that moment or reason with you because you're just going to keep saying angry things. and I just decide to get quiet. And at some point you'll calm down and we'll be able to talk about it. And vice versa.
Yeah, I just think it kind of turns into like animalistic reactions.
Yeah.
So you see like a weak member of the herd.
Okay.
So you just kind of attack it.
Okay. But then everyone's become sensitive to the criticism.
Right.
Right? You're saying you're attacking a weak member of the herd, but maybe they see you as weak.
Yeah, they can see me as weak, but I'm not the one that's crying about it, right? Like, I'm crying about it at the fact that they're being weak, So, like, some people might say, like, oh, well, why should it affect you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if they're being weak, they're having a moment of weakness and they want to cry or they want to pout, whatever. Like I don't, if it's something that I don't want in my surroundings, or I didn't teach you to be that way, or I don't want you to be that way, and I correct it, or I'm harsh towards you about it, it's just because I don't want other people to see you like that, or I don't want you, or I want you to realize that you're doing something wrong, right?
Yeah, but that goes back to the whole, okay, they're a young adult, right? They're over 20, right? So you're not, once you're over 20, you have your own job, you have your own car, you kind of have your own life. But even though you're living at home, you don't want to hear another adult criticizing
but
you.
Again, it falls to me, right? It does fall to me in a way. Like, it's a 50-50. Everything in life is always going to be 50-50. It's not just one side.
Okay.
It's going to be 50-50. Marriage is 50-50, right? Raising your kids is 50-50. You can say what you want to, you can do what you want to, but there's another side to it, and both of them have to come together to make it happen. That's just how it works, right? It's the wolf pack, or the clan, or whatever you want to call it, right? The cooperative family group.
Yeah.
Your extended family is still part of your group, right? Your posse. So but then again, like I said, like where I was going with this is like, it also is me, right? I also have my traumas, and I've dealt with them my way, and I've faced them my way, and so the moment that I see somebody dealing with one of their traumas, what's triggering their trauma, but I think that they've lived long enough in life that they should have faced these issues already, or corrected them and know what's wrong with them. Mm-hmm. Because maybe at that age, I had already faced that myself, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of infuriating that was like, dude, you've had all this love, all this support, all this, we've had conversations. Why are we here?
Yeah. Why are we having this conversation
snap
at this
out
point
of it.
in time?
It doesn't affect you. We try to talk about it. You're being stubborn. You're being a little sensitive punk about it. Like, drop it.
Yeah.
And then it's just frustrating, or it frustrates and angers, and so then the wrong tone comes out, and then maybe the criticism, and then you're like, I know why you're being a little bitch about this, because of your trauma, and you don't want to accept it. So here, let me illuminate you by letting you know that this is why you're being like that.
Yeah.
That scenario is triggering this trauma of your life. So I want you to face it and deal with it.
But again, going back to the whole idea of tone, it wasn't said in a understanding manner, which I understand because it's not who you are.
So if you're trying to dress like a man and act like a man and pretend to be a man, I expect you to be a man.
Yeah.
Right? So if you're showing me that, hey, look at me, I wear cowboy boots, and hey, look at me, I have cowboy hats, and hey, look at me, I'm trying to be a man, then be a man. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
Whatever scenario you want to call it, right?
Yeah. Okay.
And when it's just a costume or a fad, and you're not dealing with this like a man.
Okay. And that's your perspective.
Right.
That's what you believe. And I agree with you to a point, because I do believe that there was a different way to address the situation. And, that's just not who you are.
Right.
So it is what it is.
Real quick, so we didn't finish going over the list of those things, right?
Okay, so this kind of maybe tie in with struggling with self-worth, right? So you were talking about how sometimes maybe this young man is wearing a facade, right?
Right.
Trying to, and in every other aspect of his life, he's like a man, you know, he's trying to be a manly man, you know, always working out, always talking tough, always this, always that. Hey, I drive a truck. Hey, I drive, you know, all these different things.
Mm-hmm.
And underneath all that is somebody who's struggling with self-worth.
Okay.
Because of the abandonment issues, you know, that are, you know, I think coming up on the next section, you know, because fear of abandonment is the next one. So between fear of abandonment, you're going to be suffering with, and this lack of love, of true love, you know, from a parent that you should have received true love from and not abuse of any kind. It's kind of like, who am I? You know, who am I really? What am I worth really? Am I just a babysitter? Am I just am I just a driver for my siblings? Am I just, you know, what am I? Just a paycheck to help my parents get along? Like, what am I? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think we all go through moments like that, right? When we're trying to figure out who we are, what's our purpose in life, why are we here, what are we doing, right?
And again, I understand that at that age that he is, and those young men, I can't just say him because it is a couple of young birds involved in this whole situation.
Right.
I mean, we were already together. We're planning our wedding, and you know, we would be parents, I think, in like another year, right, from this age. So
His age.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. It's like, so at his age,
right?
And I'm not just his, but I'm saying those birds in general, because
right. That little group
of kids, of young men. You say,
and
kids.
maybe that's the other thing, right? Maybe that's another thing that for me infuriated me or got me the way I did, right?
Yeah.
The fact that I'm comparing myself to him at that age.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm getting ready to, you know, settle myself with someone and start a family, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, and like you said, we're looking at places where we're going to get married, where we're going to live, what are we going to do, right?
Yeah.
So
we're not depending on our parents.
Exactly.
We're not living at home anymore.
Right. It's all coming out of our pocket, right?
Yeah.
We're the ones responsible. This is what we want. We're doing it. It's like, you guys are welcome to be part of our journey or not. Like, you can get off at the next bus stop, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is my life. This is my choice. This is what I'm doing.
And these kids are nowhere near that.
Right. So, you know, if somebody, let's say my family didn't like you, tough shit. Like, you are the one that I choose to be my partner for life. Mm-hmm. If somebody in your family didn't like me, or I wasn't, you know, the typical guy for you or whatever.
In their eyes, right?
Yeah, or good enough for you. That's their issue, not ours, right? Mm-hmm. Because for you, you were like, you know what? This is the guy I want to be with.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I guess, wow, I never thought about it that way now that you say it. But, when you think about the stuff, and we do it too as parents now with our oldest son, you know, like we think about like what we were doing at his age, and we're like, oh my goodness, thank you that we had such a good innocent kid.
Yes. And that's the thing is, you know, I can see, and it's not that our son is lacking love, and this is where I disagree with this list, is that I see a lot of these issues even in kids who have a lot of love, right? Because just referring it back to our own household, like our kid, he sometimes struggles with, or I think more than one, both, you know, I think our boys in general struggle with self-worth sometimes. Just they're at that age, right? They're teenagers. I think most teenagers struggle with who they are, or who they think they need to be, who they're expected to be by their parents and their teachers and their peers, you know, so it's a very confusing time. So we definitely grew up in a freer age where we weren't as protected, and definitely you much less protected than I was, at, you know, doing stuff and crazy things and going out with our friends and all this stuff that our kids don't do, right? Mm-hmm. And even if we do allow them to do, they always cancel. They're flakes. They're flakes. They're big time flakes, you know, so where is that coming from? Like it's not coming from a lack of love. It's not, it shouldn't, where's this lack of self-esteem coming from? You know, where's this struggle with self-worth? Where's this sensitivity to criticism coming from? You know, like, because they're definitely not self-reliant, you know? So there's a lot of this stuff that I'm like, I don't think that this article only fits people who don't have love. Right. I think it fits this generation in general. Right.
It could be why it was written, right? It could
Yeah.
be, because it's a common thing nowadays.
It's a very common thing, but they're trying to say it like it's from people who haven't ever felt truly loved. And I find it difficult to accept that this is the sole reason that people act like this.
Well,
like this difficulty expressing emotions is the next one after abandonment. And I mean,
difficulty with showing emotions,
expressing
emotions. Okay.
So, like, you have no issue expressing your emotions. This other young man, gosh, I mean, he's vented to both of us on different occasions, and we've seen him get angry with his parents before. So I don't think he has a difficulty expressing his emotions.
So right now that you touch that, right, we've seen him get upset with his parents and grandparents and significant others. And here's where it's funny for me. Yet he still stays there. He still eventually within a few days talks to them, reaches out to them. And with me, I still haven't heard anything. And
you're not his parent technically.
Right. But it just goes to say that maybe I said something that some of these other people have said.
Well, or it hurt all of them equally, so they're just all avoiding you or us in general.
Right.
It was like we said at the beginning, just a topic that isn't touched. It's something that's just not
it's
said,
so taboo,
it's
right?
so taboo to bring up that you said the taboo thing, so now you're cut off. You know what I mean? At least for a while, right? Until they can reset whatever.
I'm like Oscar bringing the awkward.
Well, this goes back to difficulty expressing emotion, right? Because if they were really mad or hurt by what you had said, they didn't express it verbally.
Oh no, yeah. And then at the same time, now that you say it, it's like they probably do feel betrayed. They probably are hurt because you were saying they felt they were in a safe space. And they thought they could,
express
themselves and vent and cry.
And you shut them down.
And and maybe my approach was definitely not the correct one then. I just, said nip it in the bud and shut up and deal with it. It's not your
because it doesn't
affect
them.
Yeah.
Like ultimately your whole point, your whole rant in that conversation was just like, dude, it does not affect you in any shape or form. Like, why the heck do you care? And yes, this is the other little birds involved are very close to him, right? They're also family, right? Extended in one way.
He was really affected. Like, he
yes.
seemed really hurt by it.
Yes.
And it's just like, sometimes as a younger person, you have no right to judge a older person.
A parent figure.
Yeah, we might think that we know more.
You never know more.
But we don't, right? I mean, there's a reason why they're old and wise, right?
Yeah.
There's something we learn from old people.
I don't know that this person's so wise, but
no.
But they're free to move on with their life, right?
Yeah. But we're talking about, we're in the group that we were in. Some of us are older and we have lived more, right?
Yeah. Well, we're all older than him,
and
for
so,
sure.
And it's funny, right? Because a lot of people see us and they're talking stories, and we, like we said before, we elaborate and we have some story to add to whatever they might experience they might have. And it's like, it's not that we're know-it-alls, it's that for some weird reason we've lived through a lot of weird stuff.
Yeah, we have a lot of insight into things that people maybe don't think we should or would. And yeah, it's definitely not that we're trying to be
or somebody close to us has gone through it and we've been along for the journey and helped, or just been a shoulder, or believe it or not, just listen and not judge.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, okay, so let me go back to the list real quick so we can finish up this list. And then the last one says resilience. So people who don't feel loved are resilient. And that can go back to the whole, self, not depending on anybody. But again, I think it contradicts, this list does contradict itself, because it's like, how can you be resilient and self-sufficient and still have no good self-esteem, right? Like, that doesn't really, in reality, it doesn't really work. Like, I've never known a go-getter personality that can manage to get through everything with a super low self-esteem. Like the people who are, I mean, you might falter every now and then, but it's not like you're not constantly in some state of depression, thinking that you're not good enough or that you can't be successful. That's not, I don't think that's a reality. Yeah. I don't think that's an accurate description of people who have not ever truly felt loved, you know? So anyways, those were the 7 things on this article. And I mean, just related to knowing you or in my own life, I can't say I really have a lot of trauma per se. I'm sure there's something somewhere that is just not talked about in my life. But in your life, everything's talked about. I think we've talked about everything.
But that's just how I've dealt with it. It's you could call it trauma, but it's more like a trust issue, right? Because when it all comes down, it all comes down to the trust.
Well, and that's because you had to learn to rely on yourself. That's just relying on yourself because you couldn't trust anybody else to make things happen for you. You had to do it yourself.
Right. So here, let me go over real quick some ways to deal with trust issues, right?
Okay.
All right. So and it's just funny because this is so true. It's like it's so dead on. All right. So one thing was to acknowledge your issues, right? So take responsibility for your situation and don't blame others, which is one of my things, right?
Yeah.
Like I even say to our kids, like, I don't want to hear your excuses. Like, take responsibility and don't blame others, right? Okay, there's one. The other one is identify the source, right? So trust issues can stem from past experiences like betrayal, broken promises, or traumatic events. So you have to identify what the source is, right, of whatever your issue is.
Yep.
Right. So then the moment that you acknowledge what the source is, you just go build from there, right? Be patient, build the trust and gradually don't expect too much too soon. It takes time. Right. So you have to be patient through the process of dealing with, the source of your issue and acknowledging what the issue is and what you have to take care of. Be trustworthy. So, of course, be open about your feelings, thoughts, and limits. There's nothing wrong with it. It's by being, open about it, you deal with it. Practice forgiveness, right? Give people a chance to change and be understanding when they make mistakes. That's the one that I definitely have a problem with. I can forgive. I just can't forget. That's my one problem.
Okay.
Right? I can be like, okay,
I don't
forget
think
to a certain point,
yeah.
But there are times when I just cannot forgive depending on how bad the offense was.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely more of a forgive and forget or type of person because I will at some point forget what happened.
Yeah.
Usually. But you are not.
No,
you don't
no,
ever
I might forget what
cost
it, but I would know that I can't forgive you. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you don't always forgive.
No. Communicate openly. Okay. So, actively listen to others and respond with empathy. So, you just communicate. Period. Yeah, I think communication, I've always said it, communicating with others is a big thing.
That word you just said right there, empathy.
That's the problem.
That's the problem for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Empathy is a problem for me.
I mean, it's not always, because you've told me many times that you could be very empathetic with a coworker, that you have a meaningful relationship with, or at least that you believe you have a meaningful relationship with, that people have come and talked to you about random stuff and that you think you give pretty sound advice, whether they take it or not. I think it's just how close you were to this person that it just took you aback. Like, come on, we raised you different. Like, what the heck is wrong with you?
But in a way, I do feel that I did have an empathy with them because I told them, I was like, hey, like this is life. This is what happens. This is,
Yeah, but the way you said it, at no point sounded empathetic. I was there.
Yeah, well,
I remember.
That's
I think
so. But if it was like a group of people that didn't know me, then it'll be. I guess it was like, of course, I should have every right to get defensive or be insulted because they don't know me. They don't know how I talk. They don't know how I come across. They don't know how I think.
Mm-hmm.
So then definitely, right? But if you've known me your whole freaking life, you already know how I talk. You already know how I get. Like, why the hell are you surprised? I mean, my buddy Eddie, right? My buddy Eddie, I haven't talked to him in a while, but there are times when he's like, somebody says something towards me or whatever, and I can see it in his face already that he's like, oh, shit.
Oh, no. My face went into oh, shit mode, too, when he started talking. The young man started talking, and then I was like, oh, crap, this is a horrible conversation we're about to have.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
I also
see?
knew that it's not the right topic.
So, see, there it is. Like if you already know, like, why be offended later on? Or
I'm not offended.
no, I'm not
by
saying
what
you.
said,
I'm not saying. I'm just saying
And
in general.
even one of the other parents that was in the household, they actually turned and looked at me and rolled their eyes, right? Like here we go. Because they had already heard all of this before, right? It wasn't the first time they were hearing this.
Yeah.
So,
it's like, oh, here we go.
yeah, here we go again.
I
He's
gotta hear this conversation again.
Yes, but now we're going to get the worst part of it, right?
Yeah.
Because you're involved now.
Oh, no. And I know the moment that I exposed that nerve, like, I saw everybody's face. Like, you can hear a pin drop. Everybody, it was like in the movie. Everyone just went like it was kind of like a Friday moment. Nobody said it, but it was like, damn.
But you know what else I was thinking? Is that the siblings were all there and the cousins were there. I know they weren't in the same room, but could it have been also like a sense of embarrassment that was like brought up within earshot of, younger siblings that maybe didn't know about all that? That just popped in my head right now.
Yeah, it could be. But, I mean, that's what you get for bringing up subjects like that.
Yeah.
I have a sister who I always remember one of the moments when we started going our separate ways. She was judging our father.
Okay.
She was going off about our dad. She was judging him and speaking badly about him. Mm-hmm. And I just remember looking at her. I was like, we are no one to judge our father for what decisions and actions he makes. He's our father. We know how he is. We know how he thinks. And we have to deal with whatever scenario he's putting in our lives. Like, it is what it is, right? Mm-hmm.
You either deal with it or you
we'll deal with
away.
it when it comes along, right? Mm-hmm. There's no point in dealing, but we should not be judging them. Mm-hmm. Like, that's the cart we were dealt with, and that's the hand we're gonna play, Mm-hmm. They did not like that I said that. Mm-hmm. They did not agree with it. They were offended by it. And, it was brought up a couple of times to other people that he said, I can't believe that he said that we are no one to judge our father.
Yeah. But, I mean, it's the same thing your father would have told them, right? He would have been like, you guys are no one to judge me. I'm your dad.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I don't know.
Well,
so it's one of those things, right? It's like, I guess you know your place and you know where you stand, and it is what it is.
Well,
so I guess we all have traumas.
Mm-hmm.
I keep on repeating myself. It's a trauma. Maybe I dealt with it wrong. Maybe what people just want is somebody to bitch to, and you just sit there and
I mean, that's what therapists are for, right?
But it's kind of like, my point of view on it is, if you don't want to hear the opinion, then just say, hey, I want to talk, but you just listen, but don't give me your opinion. Like, let me know, right? It's kind of like,
yeah,
like you go on social media and you post something, but then somebody kind of lets you know, they make a comment or whatever, and they're like, then the next thing you know, they're all offended by it. Like, well, then why are you putting out there that your significant other is left you, or they're cheating on you, or you're seeing someone else, or you know what I mean? Like, like if you don't want to hear it, like,
don't put it out there.
Yeah, don't put it out there. Like, there's stuff that you keep to yourself. Like, don't put out the drama and not expect to hear something about it, right? Like,
even though we have yet to hear anything.
Yeah, no.
about anything.
But it's kind of like, it's like, it's your private life. Like, keep it to yourself, right? Why are you putting it out there? And then you're gonna get offended if somebody's giving you advice or judging you for what you put out there.
Yeah,
it's like, then I mean, you put it out there, like, you're gonna get something.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not all gonna be likes.
Yeah.
And not everyone's going to be like, oh, girl, what's wrong? You know, or like, oh, life sucks. And then next thing you know, it's like, well, then fucking don't go out today.
Yeah.
Oh, how dare you say that to me?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I need to go out because I have to do this. And I was like, well, then fucking deal with it. So you know what you have to do then. Then why be crying about that? It sucks. Like, deal with it. Like, suck it up and drive on, right?
Yeah.
But no, what they want to hear is, oh, no, girl, or oh, no, bro, what's wrong? Oh, let me call him.
Yeah.
Is everything okay? I'm here for you, boo. You know, like
You're so dramatic.
but that's what they.
you're
But that's
right,
what they
you're right,
fucking
you're
want,
right?
right? That's what people want. Like the reality is that no, I'm not. I'm not that person. All right.
No,
Like,
no, I'm well aware. I'm well aware.
I'm not gonna be
I'm
that
actually
person.
not that person either.
Yeah,
it's,
I'm
it's
not that
really
person.
hard.
Like, if you want my help, it's like, hey, bro, can I talk to you? I need some advice. Hey, for sure, I am here for you, no matter what.
Yeah.
Right. But
I feel really awkward when people want to tell me their problems.
yeah.
I mean, I'm happy to listen.
I don't. I
Yeah,
don't.
because
I'm glad that they trusted me with it.
Well,
you
see,
know?
no, I think it's because every time I've tried to give people advice and then they thank me for the advice, it just made me feel super cringy.
You know what I think it is too? Like the fact that, like, for me and for you also, because you did it in college and I just did it for the heck of it. Like the fact that I think we read psychology books
Yeah.
and we listened to psychology podcasts or movies
Yeah.
or documentaries and stuff like that. And so even watching a freaking movie, we're like, oh yeah, it's gonna be this person because of this and that and that and that, right? Like every time a murder mystery or something like that.
Sometimes they're just super predictable.
Right, yeah, but we're always, you know, and we're like, oh well, think about it. That person was molested, or this person, you know, was abused as a child, and so of course they have this issue, or they have this daddy issue, or they have this abandonment issue. We always try to psychoanalyze everything and give it a reason why people do what they do or their actions, right? So I think that's where you and me, I think that's why we feel like that. Like when we hear something and we see people going through stuff, we're automatically our little clip word comes out and we're like, whoa. Because I know I've done it where somebody's telling me a story about a family member or their loved one and this happened. And I'm like, was their father in the picture? Mm-hmm. And then they're like, oh, well, no, they didn't have exactly. They have daddy issues. So therefore, that's why they're like this with you, because when this in this scenario, it makes you feel. And they're like, oh, how dare you?
Yeah.
How dare you go there? Or, you know, it was like.
I was going to say, now that you're saying that, I was like, the one time this other parent was venting to me, oh, yeah, that sucks. Oh, yeah, that's unfortunate. But in my head, the whole time, I was like, it's probably because of this, and it's probably because of that, and it's probably because of this, and because you as a parent are like this, or your husband is like this. You know, in my head, I was just like, or maybe this happened, and you don't know that it happened. You know, but what was coming out of my mouth was just like, yeah.
Yeah, because you didn't want them to be.
Well, they weren't asking for my advice.
Right.
They were just venting.
Yeah. But if you say that, it's kind of like you're giving advice, so then they're going to be defensive, right? Or criticism, right?
Yeah.
And they don't want that.
Oh,
which
no.
is something we talked about before.
Yeah. And
right?
at some point, they did ask for, oh, what do you think? And I said, well.
You know what? It sucks when I get that. It was like, do you want me to be honest? Or
Yeah.
do you just want me to be the friend? Like,
yeah. I
like
know.
I've said that a couple of times, and they're like, you know, they have that look like, oh shit, he has more than an opinion of what I was expecting. Like he's gonna, you know, like he's not gonna sugarcoat it. Or do I want to sugarcoat it, or do I not want it sugarcoated? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, okay, no, dude, just give me the friendly one. I was like, okay, well, you know, I think that maybe you should guys have a conversation and maybe go on a date and have a nice little dinner. And probably if that doesn't work and if communication doesn't work, maybe you start seeing a psychiatrist, you know, maybe a marriage counselor or, you know, whatever the scenario. That's just the scenario I picked, right?
Yeah.
And then but it was like, okay, well, give me the real, give me what you think. Like, oh, she's fucking somebody else, buddy.
Yeah.
Like she's cheating on you. Forget about it. Like you're done.
And then they get mad at you.
Yeah. How dare you? Or, you know, or like, oh, no, dude. She's buying herself that car. You have no say so on that one. Like, that's her money. That's in her mind. That's her money. You have no say so.
Let's take this back to trauma real quick before we close out here, because I think we got off tangent.
Yeah, we do, like always.
Yeah, starting to talk about advice and whatnot, but ultimately, I mean, The point of this conversation was
Trauma.
and how this conversation with a young adult who was judging an older adult, a parent, ultimately a parent type figure, right? For moving on with their lives in a situation that did not affect them because it wasn't their parent. But, I guess it's hard to remember when we're having conversations with people about their trauma, right? Because we're not trained. We're not all trained to be psychologists. We're not all always empathetic. Like, it could be stuff going on in your head. Like, maybe you're usually a really good listener, but in that moment, just it wasn't going to happen. So, and excuse me, people, if I sound weird, I think I'm getting a cold. I know our kids have a cold, so I think I'm fighting it. But going back to the whole trauma thing and being empathetic, I mean, we all got stuff going on at one point or another in our lives, and we just got to step back. I think we have to try to remember as hard as possible, just step back, think about the mindset you're in before you respond to people, and maybe before you put out stuff, think about the mindset that you're in before you're putting it out there. Because if you're just going to rant and rave to a group of people that are older than you about another older person, think about that.
Well, I mean, and the other side of that coin, right, is if you're that person that you're sitting there and somebody is coming to you with this, with the issues or the complaints or whatever it might be, maybe my lesson, what I've learned from this and talking about it right now is more of just be quiet and listen.
Yeah.
Just be quiet and listen and keep your opinion to yourself, and then just, let them whine and cry about whatever issues they might have.
Yeah.
I guess be that shoulder or that ear. Like when they say, I want to talk, we need to have a conversation. It's more of I have to have a conversation. I want you to hear what I have to say, and I don't want you to say anything or give me your point of view. I just want you to hear me bitch and complain.
Yeah. But I mean, the reality is we don't think about that, right? When we're especially in a trusted circle,
right,
we just think that we have that
already
available
to
us.
I remember right now when I was saying that, I just remembered that's one of the things that used to piss off my old man. He used to say, we need to have a talk. And I was like, we or you need to talk? And you just like, see, I gotta talk to you. Wow. So I was like, because you always say we need to have a talk, and you're the one that does all the talking.
Yeah, that's what most parents do, right?
Yeah, so.
All right. Well, I mean, if you guys have made it this far, thank you very much. And please let us know what you think. Like, if you were in that situation where a young adult is coming to vent to you about an older person moving on with their life, do you remind them of that it's not their place? Or do you just listen and say, oh,
yeah, or how do you deal?
I'm sorry to hear that you feel that way about it, and drop it.
Yeah, and how do you deal with it? Well, what's your approach? Is it more of you just listen and nod your head, or are you an honest friend or a family member and let them have it?
Yeah.
Do you have that empathy for weakness and, bitching and crying? Or do you just give them the tough love that sometimes people need? Mm-hmm. What's your approach? How to handle this?
Okay.
But once again, thank you for listening and cruising on along, and I hope that you all had a happy Halloween. And you can hear it in my wife's voice what happens when you go trick or treating late at night.
Yeah. All the kids are sick
with the change in weather. So yeah,
I don't know. This whole change in weather, I just we haven't been taking our vitamins, and this is, I think, what happens. Immune system's weakened, and then not getting enough sleep.
I really think also that the weather being as crazy as it's been doesn't help out.
Well, I mean, other people haven't gotten sick. Are you sick?
I'm not, but I know a lot of people are getting sick.
We'll see, but that's why I think that it's just immunity in general. It's not necessarily weather change, but that's another topic.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Hold on.
All right. Have a good night.
All right, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.